I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to call the workshop.
It was good.
I'm going to call the workshop to order. There's still some people that are arriving. County Manager O'Connor will be here, and I know that Commissioner Carter will be here as soon as she's finished with her morning duty of welcoming a group of people, I guess. Yeah, doing a welcome. So I'm Mary Jo McGuire, and I'm Commissioner District 2, and I'll be chairing the meeting today on historic buildings. And so I'm gonna we'll go around the room, and everyone will introduce themselves first, and then we'll continue.
Raphael Ortega, District 5.
Victoria Reinhardt, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 7.
Jim McDonough, County Commissioner, District 6.
Estamadas Castillo, District 3. Amy Minow, Minnesota Landmarks Center.
Jean Kruger, Property Management.
Joanna Berg, Deputy County Manager.
Janet Guthrie, County Manager's Office.
Scott Michaels, Jones Lang and South Management.
Lindsay Boyd, Jones Lang Center. Lynn Chase, Minnesota Landmarks.
John Felipe, Property Management.
Gary Marachek, Property Management.
Amy Schmidt from the County Attorney's Office.
Concept of Communications Public.
Jennifer Rourke, Government Relations.
Chairman David Search.
Matt Hill, Commissioner Carter's Office.
Commissioner Ceceo's office. Darren Tobold, Ramsey County Historical Society Volunteer Tour Guide. Victoria Reinhardt's office.
Joanne Ellis, Commissioner McDonough's office, and also a volunteer. I know.
Melissa Jimrock, not a tour guide, but I am the aide to Commissioner McGuire.
Hi, Ryan O'Connor, County Manager.
And as I said before, Mary Jo McGuire, County Commissioner, District 2. So thank you all for being here for this workshop, and I'm going to turn it over to Joanna Berg, our Deputy County Manager.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to do a brief introduction. As we referenced in the EGCI budget hearing in August, with this biennial budget, we moved the Landmark Center out of the budget and the budget process, and instead moved to a workshop where we wanted to talk about the Landmark Center as well as our other historic buildings. With the county commissioners in this kind of a setting, we're conscious as we would come through the budget process that those were brief updates. People had questions and wanted to talk more. We didn't have the opportunity to do that. So I worked with the budget chair earlier this year to make this transition, and this will be then our first presentation of Ramsey County historic buildings. So we'll be interested both in your feedback about the workshop as well as continuing this concept as an annual update moving forward. With that, I'll turn it over to Jean.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner McGuire, Joanna, for the introduction, and thank you, Commissioners and others here today for the opportunity to speak with you about our historic buildings. The purpose today is really information sharing on the 4 historic buildings: Landmark Center, Union Depot, St. Paul City Hall, Ramsey County Courthouse, and the historic barn. All 4 of these buildings are on the National Register of Historic Places through the National Park Service. In essence, we're challenged to maintain these buildings, the exterior specifically, really in their original condition. Some additional historic designations exist on a couple of these buildings that affect parts of the interior based on local designations and or funding sources in the last years. But primarily today we're here to talk about them as being on the National Register. As I said, these designations do bring some challenges to us related to the ongoing maintenance and repair of these buildings, including the time it takes to seek and obtain approval if we are going to make any major exterior modifications, and also, unfortunately, does typically lead to incremental costs over maintenance on any newer type of building that we do have. I'm going to share a brief overview with you of the 4 buildings and then ask individual experts on each of the properties to come and share more of the details. As I mentioned previously, there are 4 buildings. As you can see on slide 3, all 4 were constructed in roughly that same time period, the early 1900s, and mostly received their nomination and designation as historic in around the 1970s. Union Depot is the one anomaly on that, is it actually has two different stages of designation. The first one was for the head house itself, which is only a part of the building, a portion of the property. And then in 2014, the entire building and training platform were added to the national designation. All four buildings have had major renovations in the, hesitate to say recent history, but in the relative recent history. Obviously, Union Depot having the more recent renovation, and Landmark Center last major renovation almost 45 years ago. The Union,
I'm sorry, because we're talking about the historic designation. The barn, I believe it was put onto the National Register, it was after I became a commissioner. Because we commented on that, so I don't know if there's a difference between the historic building, and, we'll get into why and everything. But I would just have you double check on that date, or maybe it was kind of like the Union Depot where they had two different phases to it. I think that may well be the case now that I think back on it.
thank you. The ownership of the properties is a bit varied in terms of the history. The Union Depot was actually, in essence, as a property put back together in various parcels. So there were numerous purchases that dated between 2005 and 2012. Ramsey County, in fact, assumed ownership of Landmark Center in 1976. And for the City Hall courthouse as well as the barn, Ramsey County has been in ownership really since inception. The City Hall courthouse co-owner with the City of St. Paul. So we have a little bit, different ownership history and structure specifically on the City Hall courthouse. You'll note significant differences in the sizes of the building space between the four buildings and also in the land area. Land area varying from those downtown buildings here that occupy more or less a city block to Union Depot, which as a property is 33 acres, significant land area in Lower Town. The buildings have different space types in them, and that drives the uses of the buildings. Landmark Center, as you know, cultural center, event center, and also some office and retail space in it, is managed for us by Minnesota Landmarks. Union Depot, as a transit hub and event center, also has office and retail space within it, and residential or condominium units within the property, so truly mixed use. City Hall Courthouse obviously has the courts and the office space, law library, and the historic barn has office space as well as some storage. I should mention Union Depot is managed for us by Jones Lane LaSalle, JLL that's here, and City Hall Courthouse and the barn are managed by property management. If there are any questions on the overview, we could take those. Otherwise, I would like to
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Again, going to the barn, I thought that there was also, and probably get into that this afternoon, but the University of Minnesota Extension Service, I thought they had they had there's programming out of there, and the Master Gardeners, and so it's not event space like the others are, but there's programming coming out of here, and I don't know that that's really expressed in office and storage. So I think there's a lot of programming that goes on in there.
Yes, Commissioner Reinhardt, there is, and in essence, their use of the space is a lot around the office and the storage, but as we get deeper into the uses of the space, we do provide the information on the programming that they do there.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, so some of these say event, so that's different than office. I mean, event is like a big event, and office can be programming within an office. I guess just a description of what these uses have. So it says events which would be bigger than a programming event, right?
Yes, Commissioner McGuire, the case here of abbreviating with event really means that there are spaces that are used for both public and private events on a periodic or even ongoing recurring basis that are not leases or, continuous use of office space. So it's really about the space, not trying to highlight exactly what the activities are or the users are doing out of that space.
Thank you. Commissioner Reinhardt.
I guess as far as an overview and something becoming part of the record here, it seems like, when you have courts, office, law library, you kind of know what they do. So even if you just put extension or something there that indicates that it's not just people working in an office, it's public comes into these 4 events. One of the big events obviously is the county fair. That building that's an event. And so, it doesn't seem to be reflected here, because there's a lot of activity in that building.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I would like to introduce Amy Mino, who I believe most of you already know, Executive Director of Minnesota Landmarks, to share more details about Landmark Center.
Thank you, Jean, and Commissioner McGuire and commissioners and staff. Great to be here and see you again. Most of you are pretty familiar with Landmark Center. Commissioner Reinhardt and Commissioner Ortega are both on our board of directors, or Landmark Center board of directors, and we appreciate their feedback. Minnesota Landmarks is a nonprofit organization. We are wholly focused on Landmark Center, despite our name as Minnesota Landmarks. And we were started in 1970, so we're 50 years old next year. The organization began, it came out of actually a city effort with the mayor in the 1960s, when they thought that the building would be lost to the public. And the mayor put together the Mayor's Committee on Saving the Old Federal Courts Building, which is what it was best known as at that time, but it also had other federal offices in it. And that committee turned into Minnesota Landmarks. So Minnesota Landmarks raised the money in the 1970s to renovate the building and make it into an arts and cultural center. And it is kind of an interesting story, because it had to be passed down from the federal government, because it's a public building, to a local government. It couldn't go to a nonprofit like us. And so originally, actually, the city passed over the dollar. Mayor Larry Cohen passed the dollar over to the General Services Administration to buy the building from the federal government, and then the county in turn passed the dollar to the city, and it became a county building shortly thereafter. So very little time that the city actually owned it, and Ramsey County has owned and supported it ever since. So Minnesota Landmarks took over the management in 1978, and we've pretty much managed it ever since. For a couple of years it was under the United Arts Council, but then reverted back to Minnesota Landmarks 2 years later. And we've been managing it on behalf of the county ever since. It was originally repurposed as an arts and cultural center, and with an actual program of utilization was submitted to the federal government, telling them how we were going to use the building. And it pretty much is in direct compliance with that original program of utilization, and the federal government does still check up on it. I have to give reports to them. It used to be every 2 years, now it's every 5 years, letting them know how the building's being used and that it's being taken care of, which I'm happy to say it's in great shape. Thank you to Ramsey County for taking care of that building. So our current users, and this again was part of that program of utilization, that the idea that it would be used as a home for the arts. And many of our organizations in the building have their office space there. We have 15 arts and cultural organizations in the building, including Minnesota Landmarks. And then we also have a small number of commercial tenants now as well, including our cafe, which runs on the first floor. We also we have a volunteer association, which provides almost $200,000 in volunteer services every year. to the organization, and they run our tours, they run our landmark gift shop, and they run our volunteer association, which helps out at all of our public events too. So, and then of course we rent the building for private events as well, lots of weddings, proms, community celebrations, and last year between the rental events and our programmed events, almost 1,000 events occur in the building on a yearly basis. Minnesota Landmarks itself, through its tours and its public programs, over 260 programs in 2018 alone. And I did bring our annual reports. I know some of you have received them before, but I'll just pass them around. And then within it is a summary of our Urban Expedition program, which is one of our most popular family programs, which just finished up in May. And so that one's new. I don't think you've received it. So we can go to the next slide. A couple of our successes, again, 2018, I already mentioned the 260 plus community programs, but also the over 400 client events too. In fact, Ramsey County is over at Landmark Center today. The support staff is using the Corteil and the auditorium. So we're always happy to see the county in the building. Our building attendance last year in 2018 went up. That was the second year in a row. So we're at about 246,000 visitors annually using the building. And as I mentioned earlier, lots of volunteer hours that are coming, not just from our volunteer association, but also my board of directors. We have 26 full-time board members, and then also about 8 honorary board members who actually still support the organization and participate in our committee structure. Last year, we received, we're always pretty high on the TripAdvisor, love to get their certificate of excellence. We were number 14 of 202 things to do in St. Paul, which is always great. And we also, for the second year in a row, received the Best Historic and Cultural Venue from Minnesota Meetings and Events in 2019. Also got it in 2018. I'm happy to say too that the restroom renovation project is actually underway. Yes, finally.
All right.
Third and fourth floor restrooms are down to their studs right now, so really, it really is happening. But we were very happy to receive from the Minnesota legislature the $350,000 that's helping that project go forward too. So, we also just recently resealed the skylight, replaced some venting in our courtrooms, so we have a full schedule of capital improvement projects that go on in the building. Quite a few of them are done through Ramsey County's capital improvement program or the CCAMP funding as well, and Minnesota Landmarks too also comes in where it is appropriate to support those projects too in the building. Right now we have a master space use study underway with Collaborative Design Group, where they're looking at all of our spaces in the building and with a special focus on underutilized spaces in the building. How can we use them better? So we're still waiting for outcomes on that. I think that after seeing some of their preliminary drafts, they're running into some of the challenges that perhaps they had in the 1970s, where some of those spaces, and we're talking basement, sub-basement, north tower, 6th floor, some of those areas are really hard to do other things with them. But we're still looking at it, and we're going to be looking forward to seeing their final report later this year. Yes.
I'm raising my hand. Okay.
Well, Jim talks more chill all the
I
time.
know, yeah. Thank you. I love the work that Landmark Center does. Is this study going to include the lower level that we a few years ago we had talked about getting money from the legislature, to redevelop that lower level into I don't know if it was a brewery or just some space down there for a restaurant or something. And
yeah.
Is that going to be part of the study, or where did that all go? Because
Yes.
we were looking at utilizing that basement space into something else.
Yep, so Commissioner, thank you. The space that Commissioner McGuire is talking about is the Rosskeller. It's the former boiler room for the building, and it's a 2-level space, goes from sub-basement up to 1st floor. It's a really interesting, unique space. There have been thoughts and potential plans of making it into a restaurant, a brewery might be a possibility. Those type of commercial uses wouldn't qualify for state funding because of the nature of that. If it were public space in another, used in a different way, that potentially could be. But that is definitely part of what they're looking at. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Manis Castillo, and then Minor.
I'm just curious, do we have a timeline on when that study will be completed?
We have, like I mentioned, a preliminary draft came out this summer and is being reviewed by our committees. They have a ways to go on it. I'm hoping they'll have it done by year end. Collaborative Design Group is working on a couple of our other projects too. And like all the construction trades and the architectural and engineering trades, they're incredibly busy this summer. It's been really hard to track them all down. There's a lot going on. But we hope we get it by year end.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
And I was just gonna say that I think even our request to the legislature was more about planning, because we didn't know what could potentially go in there, but it wasn't actually trying to build it out because we didn't know what would make the most sense. So
that is correct.
So this is, the space use study is something that we really need to do to figure out those things.
Some of our challenges at Landmark Center, our vacant space. We're still struggling with the fact that the St. Paul Conservatory for Performing Artists moved out in 2014, and that 5th floor space has been incredibly challenging to fill. It's not quite like the other space in Landmark Center. I think it's a really wonderful space, and I think some of you have been up to see it. It is great space for a small firm or some smaller organizations, but we haven't been able to fill it. And the downtown St. Paul market is challenging. There is a lot of space available, and usually some of the clients that have looked at our space have opted for other spaces where they have parking or skyway access, 24-hour. We do not have 24-hour security in Landmark Center, so those things are challenging when you're trying to find new organizations. So still working on that.
And can I ask what, we house nonprofits, but do we also house for-profit companies? So we're recruiting or we're soliciting any
Yes,
kind
correct, that's correct. That space could certainly be filled by a commercial tenant as well. Again, we're predominantly arts and cultural organizations who then would contribute back to the vitality of Landmark Center, but we're well above. It's at least 85% nonprofit organizations. Yeah.
So we can take some commercial.
Yes, correct. I make note on the slide of the fact that the market for event venues, meaning short-term rental venues, has gotten highly competitive in the last 5 to 10 years. There are a lot more venues for potential clients to choose from, and we've noticed that, especially on our Friday rentals. Saturdays are always popular. Saturdays are when people want their weddings, and Landmark Center is a big wedding venue. Fridays are usually the second choice, and now that there are so many event venues out there, people can get a Saturday at a different place. So we are seeing that impact on our events, short-term events revenue, and of course that affects our building operations budget as well. So we're working on that. I actually have a whole new team coming in for our events department. We had 3 retirements this summer, 3 longtime employees, valued employees who ended up retiring, and so we're going forward in part with a new events department. So we'll be looking at all of those challenges together.
Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. With 4 kids and 3 married, I've been through the wedding process a few times. One of the things that I've learned since 1976 when I got married, this comprehensive package that makes it easy. And a lot of the weddings that use that space for receptions, a lot of times will do their weddings actually over in Rice Park. With the renovation of Rice Park, Do we partner with St. Paul Parks and Rec so that it's an easy fix, or not an easy fix, but an easy process for couples that are planning events like that where, you know, if they want to get married in Rice Park, but they want to use us for a reception and other parts of the world? Is there a strong partnership there to make it extremely easy for them to be able to do that, or do they have to kind of go St. Paul Parks and Rec and through all their stuff and then through us for all our stuff?
Yeah, well, of course, that's a very good question, Commissioner McDonough. We actually do have a really great relationship with Rice Park. I'm the current chair of the Rice Park Association, so we actually helped support the recent revitalization effort that was implemented earlier this year, and turned out really wonderful, I think. I hope you all have been enjoying the park. St. Paul Parks does schedule those, but Landmark Center is often chosen as an event venue, as is the James J. Hill Center too. The entire neighborhood around the Rice Park, works together for those types of things, and we do pass referrals on to each other. So we have a very strong relationship with St. Paul Parks, and I know many of the staff members over there and have worked on them for Rice Park activities.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortega.
Amy, how competitive are we in terms of all the other venues?
Well, Landmark Center has a reputation for a very preferred space, so it very much holds that. It has an ideal size on the main floor for that 150 to 250 person event site. The larger events, of course, we're not. They're going to go to the Union Depot or some of those other areas that can accommodate 500 and more. But for that size event, we're very good. We have, of course, the in-house beverage service, which Minnesota Landmarks runs. We have an open catering license, which is becoming, especially for a lot of the ethnic weddings and things like that, who want food that's a little bit different. You can actually have those at Landmark Center. And then that opening catering license, which means you can choose, any caterer who's licensed and insured in St. Paul can work in Landmark Center. So that means you can, if the economics of your event are on the lower end, you can find a caterer who's a little more affordable than some of the higher end ones. Both can work at Landmark Center. So we've tried to protect that, and I think is very important with Landmark Center being a public building and needing to be accessible to all people in the county to use it. So also, Landmark Center has other spaces that people can use when they rent the building. So we have dressing rooms, we have support spaces that can go along with those. And our staff has become very adept at doing changeovers for wedding events. So you can have your ceremony on the cortile, then we'll move your guests to another part of the building, change it over for the reception, and that's become very popular too. So again, I think all things that contribute to Landmark Center as an event, preferable venue.
Well, that's good to hear, because my concern is, whether it's the city or the county, that we tend to price these things. I've gotten feedback from different ethnic groups that have said, it's out of our price range, so they're going outside the city. They're going outside St. Paul. So that doesn't help us.
You're hearing that about Landmark Center specifically?
Landmark Center, yes. Landmark is in the pile. Yeah. And so my concern is that we don't start competing or trying to, our core mission is to provide those programming to everybody, right? And to reach down as much as possible. And that doesn't just include the arts programming, but it includes the use of the facility. And so I just want to make sure, because I've heard it too often now in the last year or two, that it's not as accessible to those ethnic and cultural groups on an ongoing basis for whatever. They're not usually huge organizations. It's not Hmong Partnership. It's not loud, but there are smaller, there's always small organizations being born every day to celebrate something, and gotta make sure that there's access for that.
Well, we do have nonprofit rates for organizations in the community too. So they can use the building at much less than the commercial rates.
Commissioner Mattis-Castillo.
I just wanted to add on, I know we pulled this out of the budget conversation, and I don't have my budget binder in front of me, but I think off memory, we're putting up $990,000, close to $1 million into it. And so I wanted to add on to Commissioner Ortega's point is that my concern is, are we continuing to subsidize something that is not accessible to much of our community and using our tax revenue to do it? And so I both value and understand the need to, as a nonprofit organization running the building, on how we, how you have to manage that, and you need to be able to sell space. But at the same time, how do we grow to a point that we can reduce the subsidy coming from taxpayer dollars? And I know that's bigger, but I've had the same concern and questions that people are like, I'm paying for this building that wealthy people get to have their weddings in, and I don't have that same access. And so I'm concerned about that and how we're spending our dollars, and I don't know, how your budget is going as an organization to help us offset that, and at what point do we, have less of an investment as a county. It's just a area of concern that I don't quite know how to answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Well, and I do think that is something that the board, our board and the Landmark Board have dealt with. And there was a point where there weren't as many revenue-producing events there. I mean, weddings have always been very popular there. And, just as with any other location for a wedding, some are more expensive than others. But I think it's been pretty reasonably priced. But for a wedding, it costs a lot of money, that's all there is to it. But so what we said as a board was, you need to bring in more revenue. And so really stepped it up and gave that challenge to the Minnesota Landmark Board. And they have done the best. I think they've done a really good job in bringing in more funds. But that's a really small part of what happens in that building. Honestly, to me, it's probably the most accessible building we have, even more so than this one. And to just go in and walk around and be part of all the festivals and the nonprofits that are there, I guess it would be good to see the percentage of time, because it is, even when there's a wedding there, the building isn't closed to the public. They just hopefully don't go in and eat dinner. But, yeah. No, I think, so the percentage of the building and how it's used, when we basically told them that they had to bring in more revenue, it's a balance. But truly, when you look at the building and being able to walk in there at any time and enjoy the building and the space and the different nonprofit things that are in there, it's probably one of the most accessible buildings. But again, I know people that were not able to have their wedding there because of the cost of it. But I think that's going to be the case no matter what. But the weddings are not the reason for Landmark Center. And so I think it's important to note what else is going on in that building, and it's a lot more. So maybe the percentage of space that's used and when it's open to the public and when you have to pay for space. And I don't think I guess when you asked about whether or not it was competitive, I thought you were trying to get to, okay, does it cost more at Landmark Center than it does at some of the other venues for a wedding in downtown St. Paul? Or is it in the middle, or where is it in the range? I don't know, maybe that's not what you were trying to get at.
Commissioner.
Thank you. All I'm saying, I've served on the Landmark Board for 27 years, 24 representing here and 4 years representing the city of St. Paul.
Wow.
And I've seen the evolution, and it's been great. And I think Amy has done a wonderful, fantastic job. She's been true to our mission. But we need to constantly question every part of this county that we're staying on track. I am getting feedback from ethnic communities, maybe because I'm Hispanic, whatever the reason is, maybe all of yous are getting it, and they ask me these questions. And I, in turn, am going to ask you the questions and make sure that we stay true to our mission. So it's not about being defensive, it's about what do we have to do to make sure we're on track. I could afford to have my daughter's wedding in Landmark, but that doesn't mean everybody in the Hispanic community could or maybe even should. But there has to be a level there where there is that access, because it is a public building. And we want it to be an ethnic cultural center, right? Where everybody could partake of it, regardless sometimes. You know, I know there are limits to all of this, but the ideal is what we shoot for.
Do we give any break to people who are Ramsey County residents if they want to have their wedding there? I mean, we do that with our, garbage hauling. You have to be a Ramsey County resident to bring it to a, not a garbage hauler, but
Don't bring your garbage to our yard.
we do it with our solid waste, with our waste, waste pickups, with our yard waste sites and things. Yard waste sites, yeah, I meant to say that. So I just didn't know if we ever considered that. I'm sympathetic to all of the questions that have been raised, and I've raised them before myself, so I just don't know. We probably don't do.
We do not do a discount for a Ramsey County resident. We've talked about it though. Mainly, it's very hard to track that down. So, is it the bride? Is it the groom? Is it the father of the bride who's paying the bill?
I get it.
It's that challenge. I think it maybe would be a little counterproductive if we tried to do that. But again, in terms of trying to keep it affordable for those in the county who can use it, we try to use the nonprofit rates and so forth so that people can use it. And then, of course, Minnesota Landmarks programming and the programming that our organizations in the building provide to it is almost, it's 99% free to the public. So we pride ourselves on being accessible to all people in the community, Ramsey County and broader, of course, because we draw visitors from all over. And the building, of course, has some more public hours than a lot of other public buildings, actually, in the county. So,
yeah, and we really appreciate that. And I know we need to move on because I know we have other meetings at lunchtime. But I have a question because I've asked this before too. Is about signage, because I know we've been having conversations about what buildings, how buildings are signed. And our libraries say Ramsey County, most of them except for Shoreview, say Ramsey County Library, Roseville, or, the Shoreview Library says Shoreview Library, so we have to work on that. But other libraries, they say Ramsey County Library and White Bear Lake. So we, I know that this says the St. Paul Visitor Center. Is there there's a sign that, it's not a permanent sign, but it's a big plastic sign that says St. Paul Visitor Center. Outside of the Landmark Center. And so I just wonder if there's a recognition that this is a Ramsey County building, that the Ramsey County Historical Society is there. And I know John is here, and I've made this point before, that we should probably have more Ramsey County items at the Visitor Center, that we should be publicizing much more of our work in that center, and we could call it the St. Paul Ramsey County Visitor Center rather than just the St. Paul Visitor Center. So these are just some questions that I have, because it is a Ramsey County building paid by all of our Ramsey County residents, and we don't need to call it the Ramsey County Landmark Center, but maybe we have some recognition that this is what Ramsey County taxpayers are supporting. And so however that can factor into all of these discussions, and as we're naming things and having a naming policy, I don't want to name the building anything, but I do think we should have our name somewhere, and we should recognize that at least our historical society is in there somewhere. So that's those are some of my concerns. And Commissioner Reinhardt.
I'm going back to the rates that are there, the nonprofit event rate. I just wonder how much that's being marketed, that people know it. I mean, a wedding is not nonprofit. But there are a lot of events as far as the cultural events that you were talking about. So making sure that people know that that's a possibility, I think is important. And I just do want to point out then about one of your comments. It's the Shoreview sign that says
Exactly,
Shoreview
yeah,
Library.
right, thank you for that
And we
distinction.
should really talk to them about that.
Yes, exactly.
I think we have, but I don't know that it's done any good.
Yeah,
Because it's not the Shoreview Library. That's not what we've done.
And it's not what we've done. Our sign, when you go in, is correct, but it is on the street mark. It's the Shoreview sign, and it says Mounds View Public Schools Building, Shoreview Library, Shoreview Community Center,
Yes.
Shoreview this. And I'm like, no. So yes, we should definitely talk to Shoreview.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you for that. Okay, anything else? I know we have 3 other things, but thank
Landmark
you.
Center.
Thank you so much for all of your work and for all of your programming. I mean, I really do appreciate it. I think we ask all these questions in love, and just to make sure that we can keep doing, all of the great work that you're doing. We want to make sure that we can sustain that. And so I know that our questions are brought up, in that light, so. Commissioner Reiner.
I told Amy that I had talked about the historic play, and she does have. Oh, you forgot that. Okay,
Okay.
Sorry, but we should still plug it.
Well,
Yes.
so, and I did that upstairs so that people would know to call. I do think it's interesting because I was with my grandchildren last night, and they said something, about the play, and they said, well, what play is that? And I said, well, it's Bobby's JP play at the Landmark Center. And they went, and where is that again? And I said one word, I said the castle, and they went, oh, yeah!
We love that.
So, I mean, that is one of the coolest buildings ever. And I'm so glad that, I think it was Mrs. Musser and a few other folks that said, wait a minute, we can't tear this down. So, but it does cost money to keep it up, and I'm glad that when Commissioner McGuire came on to the county board talking about getting state funding for a number of things there, which we hadn't really thought about before. But it's an asset to the entire state.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to see you at the history play, Thursday through Saturday, public performances in the auditorium, and it's the Teapot Dome scandal this year, which is really pretty interesting from a historical perspective, so come visit. I'd like to see that.
Thank you, Amy.
All right.
As I mentioned previously, Union Depot, since its opening, or actually just prior to its opening, has been managed for us by Jones Lang LaSalle, or JLL. And I've got Lindsay Boyd, who's the current marketing and event manager from JLL here to talk to you about Union Depot and some of the things that are going on there. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Thank you, Jane. So since its reopening in 2012, Union Depot continues to be a unique mixed-use property with a variety of users. Of course, Amtrak is one of those. We also have Metro Transit, who brings in hundreds of buses on a daily basis. Hertz is one of our tenants, and it's actually the second busiest location outside of the airport. Other bus lines that come through are Megabus, Jefferson Lines, and Greyhound. We also have a number of retail and office tenants throughout the property. Ramsey County Historical Society provides public tours. They actually took that over last summer, and then we'll be hearing from them later today. We have a number of public and private events throughout the year that we host. We have our daily visitors, of course, and then our parking patrons, and I should note that the demand for contract parking right now is at an all-time high. Ramsey County staff, a portion of them office out of there currently, and of course we have 39 residential condos in the property. So we've had a number of successes over the past year. One of those was that we are 100% leased as of last summer, so that was a big win for us. That's with our office and retail space. We currently have a new roof being installed on the east end of the head house. That is a portion of the roof that was not covered in the 2012 renovation. We also had a new digital wayfinding system installed last year. It is great. There's also an option for you to select multiple languages. It's ADA compliant. helps people navigate the building easier and get to their trains or buses. You may recall the flooding this last spring. We were affected by that. It did force us to implement the flood management plan. However, thankfully, we did not have any damage during that time. We did welcome over 1 million visitors in 2018, so yes, that was great. Our private event bookings is up 20% over the last year. We have a number of awesome events, cultural events that we host throughout the year. We have the Tibetan New Year. This Saturday we have the Fresh Traditions Hmong Fashion Show. We just hosted Jefferson Line's 100th anniversary party. So a great variety there with private events. And then of course we also put on a number of community events. So this last spring we had train days, which we extended to 2 days, and we saw 11,000 people come out for that over 2 days. And then this summer we had the Union Pacific Big Boys stop by, and between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on a Thursday, we had 10,000 people come out. It was incredible, all to see a restored locomotive. Of course, we have our annual tree lighting and a movie night that brought out 3,500 people last year. Our European Christmas market is definitely one of the most notable events that we host. We had 51,000 people last year, and this upcoming year we're extending it to 3 weekends. So we'll expect those numbers to only increase.
Yeah, is that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the European, is it?
Yep, and it's
3
the
days?
first 3 weekends in December.
And do people take public transportation to these events usually, or I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
what percentage, do you know what percentage actually take the train there, or?
We partner with Metro Transit to get free rider passes, so
wow.
people can ride the Green Line there for free, which is a great benefit. And I know they usually come back and will let us know how many people rode. I mean, looking at event attendance, it's upwards sometimes of 30–40%. Yeah, so it's great. We also host a number of weekly community events. So we have 3 free weekly yoga classes. Wednesday we also have our games galore. People can come out and play with some life-size games. And then I'm really excited to announce that starting October 17th, we're going to have a weekday farmers market every Thursday over the lunch hour, and that's going to be year-round going forward.
Wow.
Yes.
That's exciting. And that's inside the depot. I mean,
Yes,
that'll
I
be
think
indoor.
during the warmer months you might try
Yeah.
to bring it outside,
Right,
but
yeah.
starting off
But
will
in the
be in
winter
the head
months.
house area.
Wow.
Yeah. So some challenges that we've seen, low traffic, and it's a very large property, so even if there's 100 people in the building, it still can appear dead. Also, there could be 500 people up in the meeting spaces, and you don't see that while you're walking through. So low traffic is something that we've seen over the years. However, I will say that traffic has absolutely increased year over year, and we're continuing to explore new ways to activate the space on a daily basis. The escalator issue is, in the middle of a lawsuit right now. Hopefully that will be resolved in the near future. Event space in a public building. So this is something that our private event division faces. Not all users want to have a private event in a public building, just a fact. We do what we can with pipe and drape and try to accommodate them, but just a challenge that we see just being a public building. And then finally, the special train requirements that with regards to Amtrak.
And just a couple of those. What are some of those?
Just additional paperwork that we have to deal with Amtrak when we bring in trains for our train days events. I know there's a number of items that Jean has to work on with Amtrak in order to make some of those things happen.
It's a significant staff and logistical
It's
workload
special
to make
trains.
those things work because of Amtrak's requirements.
Okay. Commissioner Reinhardt.
I know that when we bought the Union Depot and went through all this, the process of choosing jail, that we at that point actually considered, would Minnesota Landmark be able to do both? And so there are a lot of, and we decided that no, that model did not fit, primarily because Minnesota Landmark is a nonprofit. And so it's a very different structure. And so I know that people have compared the two because they're both historic buildings in Ramsey County. but it's really like comparing apples and oranges as far as the way it is run and the costs that are associated with using space in there. It's significant. And so we brought the issue up with Landmark Center, but this is also one that is, as a nonprofit, I think they do more things that are free and open to the public, even though the building itself is always open. That I just wanted to make sure that we were aware of the fact that they are not the same, and that, but some of the same concerns, because they are both public buildings, they are both owned by Ramsey County, and trying to make sure that we get that cultural and business side of this just as we expect from Landmark Center. So there's similarities, but stark differences as well. Because I know that I wanted to have my 25th anniversary party there. Because actually, when JP and I got married, it's been almost 28 years, but we got married at the Union Depot. Our reception was at the Union Depot. And so, but quite frankly, it turned out I was like, I don't really think I can afford this. But that's okay, because you know what? It's what you value and what you're going to put your money into. So it wasn't that I thought it was out of, I didn't think that it was out of what I would have expected, but at the same time, I kind of, when I started putting the numbers together, said, you know what, we can do this at our house. So that's what we did. So, but we're asking the questions of Minnesota Landmark, and so I think it's important that we understand the differences and the things that they have in common.
Commissioner Ortega.
Well, first I want to start by saying I think you've, in the last few years, have done a great job. In terms of the holidays, I mean, the European market keeps growing and growing. My concern now is if it keeps growing, we got to figure out where to put it. So that's a good concern. Was there for all the events during the holiday, the big boy, 10,000 people in one day, and it was hot.
Yes, very
to
hot.
boot, and a lot of kids. So all good. But I'm around I walk downtown quite a bit, and my concerns are that, and I get it. I know that it's busy upstairs. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'm attending some of those events, and there's several hundred people upstairs that nobody gets to see, and there's maybe 100 people, scattered throughout. But I do have a concern with both the restaurant and the coffee shop. The coffee shop has been underperforming for a long time, so, and I brought this up to Joanna as an item for future discussion, and that is, how are we going to evaluate that? Where is it going? How do we see it moving forward? Because my constituents tell me that they probably could do more business if they were doing things different. I don't know that. I'm just raising the issue. And then Crave, I've been there for dinner for several times, and it's just like, and the supporters that go there, they don't want to let it go. I mean, they're keeping it alive, but they keep telling me, we got to do something to make sure we get more people in here. And so I'm bringing those issues up because we have to do something. We can't just let it hang for the next couple of years with both of those entities. And I know there are different, and there are different reasons why we engage with both of them, but eventually we gotta make sure that it's successful.
Yeah, I agree, and we definitely are aware of both of those situations. We too are disappointed in the marketing efforts and some of the issues that they've been having, and I wish that I could do the marketing for them or run their business for them, but this is something that we are discussing with both of these groups about the future. And hopefully in the near future we can talk about options for both of those.
Well, I'll be asking very shortly again as to where we are.
So on this point, and I have Commissioner Carter on this, that has a question too, but have you, well, I don't know what their contracts are and how long we have to go with that, but But, you know, there's all these different models now. I mean, Rosedale had a model that didn't work, and now they're redoing a model. And I mean, there's these great models of, you know, multiple ethnic areas, you know, where you can go and have a lot of options, so it's not just one restaurant. And I mean, are we looking at all of those? I just want it to be, you know, a depot like some of these other cities have, where there's a lot of options for what you could eat or whatever, so.
Make sure you know we hired Lindsay from Rosedale. Right?
Oh, I love it.
Yes, I'm very aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay.
Yes, no, this is something we're talking about
Thank you.
with our leasing team, and, you know,
Okay.
we are in discussions of what our
Okay.
options are going forward, and yes, I agree with
Okay,
that.
thanks. Commissioner Carter, I'm sorry.
So no, actually,
Okay.
that progressed to a point where I don't need to ask all the questions I was going to. But specifically about those contracts and the terms within them
Mhm.
that might either allow or prohibit us from those sort of options. You know, and I know that there is a relationship between the vendors who are there and us. Both want to see those organizations succeed. And so they are also, I'm sure, thinking through what their experience has been like, what it needs to be like, what the marketing efforts need to be like. Originally, when we purchased the Union Depot, we were all thinking and continue to think of it as St. Paul's, the Twin Cities, Minnesota's living room, and want to see it activated in such a way that many people are coming through. There's lots to do. There are many displays and kiosks and things of that sort. So that still remains the vision that I have, and I'm just wondering whether in the short term, we can't satisfy all of that, because we know the long-term vision also has corridors coming in and continuing to visify that space is dependent upon all of that happening. But I was just wondering if in the short term there are prohibitions to our options that would help us to independently ensure that activation.
Yes, and as I mentioned, I'm looking into a variety of options to activate the space on a daily basis. That is my number one goal at Union Depot, is to make it vibrant once again as it was back in when it originally opened. So that is something that we're actively looking into. And that's actually the
And
next slide that we were going to
Problem
discuss.
solving any of those
Yes.
prohibitions.
Yes, absolutely. So that was the next thing that I wanted just to open up for discussion. We were approached not that long ago by a group that has the idea that they would like to bring an exhibit to Union Depot. This in either the waiting room or head house area. Of course, this does come with some considerations. We would no longer be able to have public or private events in that area during that time. Depending on funding, they may only be able to open it up to paid users. That those areas would be cut off from the public during that time. Some considerations, but wanted to open up for discussion. And looking at just the future of Union Depot and what we all want.
Thank you. County Manager O'Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. And so I want to tie it to one other piece today, because I know we're flying high across multiple properties and not able to dig as deep as we probably need to on some of these big questions, right, for an important building. We just got to fully leased out space not all that long ago, and I think that's an important phase. I think there's kind of three phases as I've seen it to this, that I didn't know there were three phases, but I've seen it a little bit different, and maybe you all think of it differently. But phase one was getting through the actual construction and closing out the capital budget, which only happened about 12 months ago, right? I remember Gene came one day and said, we're officially closing that budget. And it was kind of a surprise to me, because I was coming to the county right as the space had been renovated. But that was a reminder of, wow, that was still ongoing until a year ago. I think getting the space fully leased out, and I would actually add one more piece, which is, and getting our staff up and out as part of this renovation of the courthouse, and actually giving us one more space to lease out, gets us to fully leased out. I do think it begs a broader question for the next phase of the work and what it looks like, where you say there can be some conflict between activating that space to its fullest alongside private event space, because the two have slightly different needs and you can't fully do both, and you have to kind of make some, I think we gotta have some conversation around that and some vision side, because there's room to be disruptive and there's room to take risk, and that also has risk with it. And I just think the biggest risk taken right now were to get it leased out and get it renovated. Those two have both come in really high, and I would just posit to you that, at least in front of me, part of it is now, how do you make everything thrive, to Commissioner Ortega's point around the business operations and the public space to help support that. And it's a little bit of a mutually reinforcing thing. So I just share that as a piece that we can come back and start to frame some of that. We've been having those conversations quietly internally for a bit, And I want to keep pushing. We see the success of things like Keg and Case, which give you ideas in St. Paul of what it could look like. You got to give in some other areas to get. I might be willing to do that, but that's just my opinion, so.
Okay, Commissioner Manis Castillo.
Well,
Were
I
you done?
think-
I'm sorry, were you done?
No, I'm
Commissioner
good.
Carter?
I would just say this is a really another good point for us to plug our reason for our second train, right? Because that second train to and from Chicago would come in the middle of the day, bringing users. Currently, you know, it's scheduled to arrive at 10 p.m. It really gets here at 2 a.m. every time, and everything in that building is closed. And so thinking about how we also encourage additional traffic flow at different times of the day would help build this plan out.
Great. Okay, Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. You know, to your question about discussion, this discussion piece, and I'm not fully prepared to discuss this out now because I think we need. But my initial reaction is like, yes, yes, yes. Right? To me, we've got to figure out a balance of how to accomplish a multitude of things in that building and how to make those things work, because it's not single purpose. It was designed to be a transit center and economic development stimulant within the community. We've seen that. And then, you know, Tony's talked about St. Paul's living room, but what that means and how we use living rooms is different, and we accommodate that all the time. And so, you know, what it looks like to hold events there and the impacts it have, I don't fully know. We need to get a better understanding, but, you know, my encouragement to you and your team is yes, yes, yes. The more people we get into that building, for the more reasons, the different uses we use. I'm so excited about the indoor farmers market. We've talked about that for years, and the partnership with them, what that looks like. You know, Ryan mentioned it, you know, as folks were talking, I'm thinking in my head, my God, Keg and Case, you know, on steroids down there. What does that look like? I don't know, but to me, it's like whatever creative thoughts and this goal that is you willing to believe that this market can manage, we should have that conversation about how we can be supportive of it and making sure that that building is used. You know, Amy can remember back in the days when, you know, to me, our successes when we've had to clean the floors like 3 times a day because they are just getting so dirty from the people that are coming into that building. And so, you know, that's my initial reaction to your, you know, question about discussion and exhibit space versus public amenity. I wouldn't even put versus there. It's like exhibit space and public amenity. And how do you manage that use, right? Recognizing sometimes that use is going to take up space that prohibits an and. But there's going to be times during the year or during that month when that and is going to be in that space or utilizing other spaces.
Right, yeah, Commissioner Ortega and then Commissioner.
You know, to that point, the European market has been such a huge success. I mean, that is what everybody talks about during the holidays. I mean, we should really look to see how we expand that beyond.
Fall market,
Just,
spring market, yeah.
I'm just saying, just as Jim talked, my wheels started spinning, because that is the big success. I mean, now I have people waiting to do Christmas shopping at the European. I mean, they're asking me for dates, and I'm saying, I don't know, call up, you know, go on our website. But I think the earlier we start notifying people, because I think that keeps growing, and the interest by people from all around the metro area is huge.
Yes, yeah, and that is why we are now expanding to 3 weekends this year. We are hosting also a Minnesota Christmas Market, which is a one-day craft show in November. But yeah, that use has absolutely worked at Union Depot, and we continue to explore more ways that we can expand on that.
Commissioner Carter.
I was just going to say that, you know, I appreciate the opportunity to briefly discuss this, and certainly it's not a full comprehensive discussion, but on the question of whether to nail down space, you know, exhibition is one thing, exhibit is another in terms of whether it's moving or it's staying. You know, I think that, and not just on that, but any permanent use, you know, that does not allow flexibility has to be assessed based on its potential to activate that space. And so in any contracts that we think of, you know, that should always be, of course, front of mind, that we are willing to provide that space to the extent that the use is able to help activate all of our space. And when we have a permanent user that makes requirements of us, you know, such as we're the only caterer in the building, then we have to have a lot of stuff to cater. You know, we have to have a lot of things going on. Always that balance is really important. And I would agree, yes, and plus, but the flexibility is important, and what we're sacrificing by nailing down permanent use and gaming and activation is critical.
Okay, I have a question about the bike usage. Is the bike store still down there, and how's that going?
Moortown Bike is still there, and they are absolutely thriving there.
Yay.
Yeah.
So excited.
Crystal, the owner, is doing amazing. They can hardly keep up, actually, so.
I need to get down there. Do they have e-bikes yet down there?
They
Do you
do.
know?
Yes.
Yay! Okay. I'm happy about that.
Go
Okay.
slow first.
Yeah.
More bike accidents.
Crystal's been using them a lot.
I
so
love
Renting
Yeah, you can rent e-bikes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh,
I just want to test drive my e-bike.
come on, I wanna hear about
Thank you.
this. Okay, well, good. Okay, so, what next?
We'll go on to the
Oh,
city hall.
thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much.
Full disclosure, Lindsay and I went to Haiti together on a mission trip.
Oh, that's why you're so good.
Let us know when you're ready.
Yeah, so good.
And now I'm gonna ask John Flippe to join us. Some of you know John for a number of years managed the courthouse building here for us in property management, and earlier this year he was promoted to senior building manager. So he currently has a number of properties that he manages for us, including the historic barn. And so I asked him today to come and talk about both the courthouse and the historic barn, because he is knowledgeable about both.
Great.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So Jean kind of went through an overview of the courthouse a little bit. As you all know, it's a mixed-use building with city, county, and state functions. In addition to that, we have the Memorial Hall, which has in the past hosted events for Winter Carnival and the Mayor's Ball. In addition to that, we also host weddings there, and also throughout the court floors. Lower level is home to the Ramsey County Museum and City of St. Paul, as well as the City Conference Center. And Ramsey County Historical Society hosts the public tours. Over the past few years, there have been a few successes. More recently was an elevator renovation project, which occurred over a 2-year period, and it took a collaborative effort between the county and the sheriff's department to coordinate in-custody travel and movement while the secure car was down. Some benefits from the project resulted in energy efficiencies, improved travel time, less weight, and less downtime with maintenance issues we had been observing or dealing with over the past 5 years. Another success was the remodeling of the county manager's suite and finance suites 250 and 270. With that remodel, we gained a new standard of how we design spaces and offered a welcoming entrance while keeping a secure attributes for the staff. In addition, they added a wellness room and many technology spaces. Another success was being that we have a bunch of historic wood and stone surfaces. It's been a challenge to try to find craftsmen that can restore them to the proper level without compromising the integrity of the materials. More recently, we had refinished the chambers, walls, and desks, and the mayor's suite and furniture. So that was a good success in finding a local CERT vendor to complete these projects. In addition, we've been working on a camera upgrade. It's been in the works for the past 7 years. We finally were able to implement it. And then as of today, we're down to 2 cameras left for the courthouse out of 86. And we've added the addition of 8 exterior cameras, working with the Heritage Preservation to get that approved. And it's a real attribute to the building to have eyes, especially with all the events and protests and just general concern around the area. We're able to monitor the building better and protect the asset. Some of the challenges are being that there's so many people that have access to the building. There's sometimes events that we're not aware of. For instance, this past weekend we had 3 weddings that were scheduled on Saturday. Most of the time we do receive notification, but there's a lot of times that people just show up at the doors and they're pushing the buzzer and pounding, and we don't always have staff available to, come down if, like, for instance, our janitors are janitor building guards. But as we become more efficient and cut staff from 22 down to 9, we can't expect them to be going down and answering the door on the weekends or after hours.
Yeah, Commissioner Carter.
Just wanted to ask you a quick question about that. So the wedding scheduling, does that not happen through the central?
No, we're currently working on a program, and I thought of, we need to have some sort of event scheduler for that, so that all parties involved are aware of what's happening. Right now, we use the information desk, and we put the notes down there for the security guard.
So is that a rental?
No.
Or is that just a public space where anybody can show up and just throw
It's through
away?
the judges schedule all that.
Oh.
And it can be on weekends, if a judge schedules it on a weekend?
Yes.
Really?
The other challenge with that is when we're in charge of the security screen, a lot of times they come at the end of the day when they're ready to leave. So the judges are supposed to come down and meet them and then take them in. Well, a lot of times they want our guys to come down and escort them up. So that's just another challenge that we're facing with that function.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so good job on
The
trying to
judges
work on
meet
that.
them at the Landmark Center.
So, and of course,
Yeah,
we're
so-
talking about when the judges are in the chambers
Correct.
and not in the public space downstairs.
Yes.
Because that would be an arranged, scheduled event downstairs.
Yes, if they were to host an event, well, actually, they've done it in Memorial Hall without having an official building use agreement filled out.
Oh,
And
Okay.
is there a limit to how many people can do that? I mean, can they bring in 20 people with them if they want? I mean, I've just.
Yeah, I think one of the weddings this weekend had 30.
Wow. And there's no security then? They can just come in with the judge or whoever lets them in, right?
We do have one person on, but they're also conducting the building tours, so they patrol the whole building. They can't stay with them the whole time.
all kinds of
Okay,
questions
yeah, more,
there.
okay, so that's a good, yeah, maybe we'll just ask for more,
On top of
as
that,
you work
another
on that.
bigger challenge has to do with, yes, thank you. The upgrading of the HVAC and building automation system. Right now, we have, working with a consultant to design the new system. And right now, we're thinking we're gonna have to phase it over 3 years because of the cost. So accomplishing this work in an occupied space is quite challenging. In addition to that, we have roof replacement on the 18th floor roof and the 22nd floor. And on that floor, there's also ductwork that's exposed to elements that needs to be replaced at the same time. And a new facade would need to be put in front of it and approved by the Heritage Preservation as well. This type of work will require cranes being scheduled for weekends, and they'll only be able to do certain lifts at a time. And it's challenging to try to replace this deficient ductwork while keeping an operation of the air handling units. The city sidewalk, or the city street renovation project is a 3-year project. You can notice on 4th Street, they've already asked the utilities to try to conduct their upgrades first. So that work that's currently going on is a natural gas line from Excel. We hope to, we don't know the schedule of the next streets that will come in 2020, but we're budgeting for that because we'll receive an assessment for all that work that occurs.
Okay, Commissioner
Yeah,
McDonough.
just briefly, and I know we got to, but the sidewalk work, I'm glad to see happening. It's a little embarrassing walking around our building with the condition that sidewalk in. Is that just focused, because you mentioned, you called out the Judge Cohen Memorial,
Yep.
and that's actually in, but that whole Kellogg side is pretty much all cement. When you're talking sidewalk, you're just talking the actual sidewalk, kind of right-of-way piece. I just want to make sure we're coordinating with that work that's going on, and I know, Gene, you've been a part of that, but.
So originally, this came on our radar a couple years ago, and we decided that because of the in-tube radiant heat that is in the plaza there,
Yeah.
we were talking about maybe extending that to the corner of Wabasha, being that it's the heaviest traffic we have.
Oh.
And we thought that the least amount of disruption would be when the city does their work to the streets. So we budgeted to have, we could do all the sidewalk if we're given the opportunity.
And just being aware of.
Yeah, Commissioner
The
McDonough.
coordination with Memorial work that will be coming in that.
Yes, Commissioner
Correct.
McDonough, we are in constant contact with the artist for that to make sure that as we move forward, we're doing things in the right sequence
Yeah.
so that
Thank
we're
you.
not redoing anything for the plaza.
So what is the date on that memorial, on the Cohen Memorial? Is it a couple of years from now, or what?
Well,
what-
you know, actually, they're doing an update to the city council, I think, in October.
Oh,
We
okay.
should probably have them come back.
That'd be
and
great.
do, because it's been a longer
Yeah.
process than anybody thought, but I think it's gonna be a great process.
Okay, I would love to hear an update
We could bring
on
them
that.
in for an update for everybody.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Manis Castillo.
Just since we're talking about sidewalks, at the time of improvement, you know, one of the things I noticed, Mary Jo just mentioned bikes, but bike parking is full outside, and so are we looking, and we have a lot of staff that are riding, which is great. But are we looking at updates as we do that sidewalk to add additional bike parking for our customers and for our staff?
I don't think that was part of the plan, but I've noticed that the city started helping us out by putting bike racks on their, what are they called? By where, on the bubble, on
The parking meters.
the parking meters, correct. And I don't see those being utilized.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Manis, what I'd say is, in the welcoming, accessible building money that property management would receive under the proposed 2020-2021 budget, that would be part of what we're talking about, is ensuring accessibility means a lot of things, both inside and outside the buildings. And so I don't think it's planned in the current courthouse design, which is why John's answer would be that. I'd have a slightly different answer in the conversations that Joanna and Lee and I have had so far.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good question. Okay.
So while we always want to create a welcoming environment, we also have to balance that with safe and secure. Try to, some of the welcoming things we're doing, we're trying to make the appearance of our entryways, you know, make people comfortable coming in. We've done some updating to the exterior doors, entrance matting, historic brass finishes, try to improve lighting. We're looking at LED lighting retrofits for all that first level area. Restore everything back to what it should be, especially Memorial Hall. And we maintain the equipment at the screening to ensure safety.
Okay, Commissioner McDonough.
And base this with Gene, but I want, and Brian, but I want to take it a little bit farther, because, I mean, this building was built in 1930, and, you know, there's always pieces of pop, you know, culture at that time. You know, we've had the conversation about the murals, certainly in the council chambers, but we've had some conversations about, you know, how you approach this building and the experience you have when you enter this building, right? In some ways, buildings built back then, especially banks or city, were built to be a little bit intimidating, right? You know, it wasn't, intimidating is the wrong word, but built to send a message that important things happen here, let's put it that way, right? And so, but that's not necessarily kind of this arms wide open welcoming experience, right? This level of reverence and seriousness. And, you know, the actress work has been great, but, you know, you actually use welcoming in that, and, you know, having some type of signage that actually, the first thing they see is like, all are welcome here, right? I mean, what it is, and I don't know how we incorporate that in. I know it's historic and there's not a lot of room in there, but just really sending that strong message of the first thing they see, you know, all the efforts we do and what you laid out are all kind of viewed through that lens of welcoming. But why can't we just say it? You know, why can't that be a verbal message to the people walking? Because the first thing they see in both entrances and all three entrances to Skyway is the security system, right?
Correct.
We have to balance that. Let's make the first thing they really experience is, you are welcome in this building. And oh, by the way, we're gonna make sure we keep you safe and everybody in this building is safe, right?
Sure.
I so appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner McDonough, and I wonder if there's someone else that has already come up with a sign that says, we are welcome here, we do security to keep you safe. I mean, because it is true, so many buildings, the first thing you see is the security thing, and there's not a sign that welcomes you or anything. So I just second that sentiment, that we have some welcoming signs and explain
Yes.
security is for their benefit, you know.
Yes,
whatever.
Commissioner McGuire, Commissioner McDonough, that is something that is on our, more than our to-do list right now, but it's moving a little slower than we would all like.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Is that good on?
We can talk about the conversation. Okay. I gotta run, but I'm sorry, but I gotta run.
Okay. Thanks. Okay.
All right, the barn.
Wait, we own a barn?
We own a barn.
Historic barn.
Yeah, it's a historic barn.
As was mentioned earlier, the main tenant is the U of M Extension Services. They do offer many programs, Cooking Matters, the SNAP ED, EFNDP, and the 4-H. As well as they also offer the Master Gardener Program. Ramsey County Public Health uses some of that space for storage of recycling and waste receptacles. And as you know, that it is the home to the Ramsey County Fair, and Ramsey County Sheriff's Office operates the freight farm off the second level in October.
So there's a.
Yeah, Commissioner Mendes Castillo.
There's a note on the bottom about no user agreements existing, that's a huge red flag.
It's just a sub-note, what do you mean?
I'm like, let's skip over it,
This
so
was
can you
intentional.
explain that a little bit?
Do you want me to jump in? Yes, so I'll be honest, since my just about 2 years here, it took me a while to realize that we, in fact, the county has no specific agreement with the Fair Board for the use of the property for the county fair, nor is there any separate user agreement with the Sheriff's Office for the freight farm. It's been highlighted, and we are moving forward to establish a type of agreement, different type for each of these users. But it truly is critical that we establish, if nothing else, you know, responsibilities, liabilities, indemnification for both of these events to take place in the property. The barn, as we'll go on to talk, has some specific concerns and issues, and without really delineating responsibilities for these uses, we truly are at risk, and we're going to move forward and reduce that risk.
Yeah, County Manager O'Connor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm gonna go one step further and say, we can't, based on the current status of this space, we don't feel like it's prudent to let things operate out of this building without use agreements in place. This is not a financial thing, it's a make sure everybody understands the risks, and right now, I think everyone assumes that property management, understands the risk, but property management's not always there. And so for things like Fright Farm, we gotta make sure the sheriff's office is understanding the risk and helping to adhere to some of what Jean's gonna lay out about where we have structural deficiencies, for lack of a better term. I want to just peg one other piece, which is we're going to acknowledge some of where we have like structural things here without trying to solve it today. And the reason I say that is as part of the broader accessible facilities and what we're thinking about for our own organization, this campus is a part of our long-term vision for Ramsey County, the broader Maplewood campus site. And so part of it is we don't want to go way down that rabbit hole today of what space this could play potentially there, but I don't want to put a Band-Aid on something that may require a larger conversation around what that future site might be a part of. We might be older than that, and we're still like figuring that out before December. So in December this year, we're gonna come back and talk some about that, but we're gonna highlight some of the challenges, but it's like, well, why aren't you just fixing the stairs? And this is the answer why, is because there might be a smarter way to fix the stairs in conjunction with a bigger play. And so we're making sure we're both compliant legally today, but thinking toward a more cost-effective way to approach all of it soon.
That's great. And have you already come up with the Fright Farm agreement? Because it's starting, right? I mean, they're in progress.
Right,
Yeah.
no, we have had discussions certainly around the key elements, and we have a little bit of work to do in the next week.
Okay, I was gonna say, they're already advertising, and I think it's,
Right.
it's planned as we speak. Okay, Commissioner Greiner.
Well, and the Freight Farm, I mean, we had an officer that was killed there, and we had a lot of discussion, it was directing traffic.
Oh.
Oh.
Wow, okay.
No, sorry.
Yeah, oh my God, we didn't know about
He was
that.
directing traffic, but the fact is, we found out then that, I mean,
Wow.
even for volunteers and what all this means, and so I thought, honestly, I thought that some of that had been dealt with, because we went, wow, they're operating this there,
Operating without that.
and we don't have anything in place that says that this was something that was official for Ramsey County. So, yeah, I thought it had been dealt with. But I was just in the North St. Paul parade last Thursday. I think it was Thursday. Anyhow, and the hearse was there. And again, I mean,
You mean this is the hearse that advertises, for the Fright Farm?
I am just, skipping right over things.
Yeah, you're just like assuming we know all these things. The hearse was there for the Fright Farm, okay. I've not seen this hearse before.
You haven't?
I don't think he goes in my parade. I don't think he's in my parade.
Okay, it's a hearse.
I'm
and it's
glad he's
all-
not in
and
mine.
people are, I mean, monsters, and, it's pretty amazing to see. So there are some things, and hopefully that's part of what is included in the sheriff's, under the sheriff's purview, because that's who's doing this, but it's
Yes.
volunteers
Yes.
as well. And so there's a lot of complications with that. And as far as, having a user agreement, obviously we need to have a user agreement. And I don't think it was anything that was, I mean, it was overlooked. I don't think there was anybody saying, oh gee, I don't think we're gonna do that. No, I mean, the University of Minnesota Extension Service has been out there forever. And probably, and the Fair Board, again, when we have the fair, it's been there for a long time. So it's just things that we needed to tie up, that we all assumed were. And I'm not gonna say anything more about death or anything else. But I do want to, but one of the things that's interesting is, you talk about the outside of the building and the historic preservation designation of that. It also goes to the inside, because we wanted to put in some fans upstairs, and we were in the loft, whatever it's called. And we had to go through a lot to be able to do that, to make it functional, but anything that, because of course a fan is going to vent to the outside, how can you do this? So just as with all the other buildings, it's not just the outside, but it's also the inside. And I think with the stairs, and some of the things that were put into place before the historic designation are some of the things that we have to deal with there as well. So, again, with our other facilities as well, it's what happened before and what's happening now, and how do we meld those two together and make sure that we're doing the things that are appropriate for a historic building. Because it really is a pretty cool building, but one of the things that when we built the family service center there, the city of Maple Woods had all kinds of conditions. One of them, by the way, which was really important, was the sidewalk along Wiper Avenue. That was part of the condition because we needed to make sure that people could get to and from places safely. We have done some work with signage for the building and for advertising the county fair. I mean, we've worked in partnership with these folks for a long time, and so I think it's a really good relationship, and it's going to be best for everyone to get this all figured out. So, a lot of this, as I said, it deals with other buildings as well, and the uniqueness of them being on the historic register. But the fact is, they're on the historic register. These are things that we can be bold, but there are some things that we cannot do.
Commissioner Ortega.
Well, I just want to make a comment in terms of that bigger picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think we need to make sure we integrate into, because as we move forward and we talk about equity, we're more and more we pigeonhole what that means. And it should apply to everything in the county. And we still have activities that take place in certain part of our facilities that are not fully integrated in a sense in terms of all the communities. So for example, I've gotten feedback from folks that say, you go to the county fair. I mean, there's very little reflection of our communities at that. And I think that should be part of the discussion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ortega,
Yes, County Manager.
we will attempt to meet that bar in December when we specifically talk about all of that. I appreciate you bringing that up.
I really appreciate it too, and yeah, so as part of user agreements that we need it to say we reflect the diversity of our community or whatever, but I appreciate you bringing that up too, so I don't know what we can do. Well, we're gonna have to have a temporary one for the sheriffs right now,
Well,
but yeah.
we'll come back and
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about this
yeah.
in December.
Okay, yeah, and Commissioner Reinhardt?
I just also, in talking about our vision, and I know we're in historic buildings, we're going a little off of that right now, but at the Joint Property Tax Advisory Committee meeting yesterday, I talked about the fact that, the city of St. Paul is half of our county. The rest is the suburban area. There are differences, but there's a lot that's the same. And we need to recognize that issues like homelessness, mental health issues, racial disparities, it's throughout our county. Even if there's more people living in St. Paul, that we need to make sure that we are looking at the whole county. Sometimes that means we have to do things a little bit differently, but two things. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, we want to have this all throughout the county, but we really want to make everything so that that it's in St. Paul, and vice versa. Because we want to embrace the diversity that we have in trying to address these issues. We don't want to give the impression, and the way we do things, that this is all a St. Paul issue. It isn't, but it cuts both ways. We as a county need to recognize that these issues are in the suburbs as well as the suburbs, recognizing that the issues in St. Paul affect the entire county. And I think sometimes we've not been doing a really great job of looking at the county as a whole, because we look at where the needs are and what those needs are. They may be different. They are different, let's face it, in between even neighborhoods in St. Paul and neighborhoods in the suburbs too. So taking a more holistic approach. as far as what does it look like and how does it reflect us as a county and our values throughout the county. Thank you. Okay.
Majority of the recent successes have been on space utilization of the first floor, including restroom upgrades, lobby, office painting, new carpeting, and improved HVAC controls. In addition, the Master Gardeners program.
It's noticed. I just wanted to
Yeah,
know.
it's beautiful down there,
Because
yes.
Mary Jo and I go to.
Go to extension there.
So as far as the historic challenges go, there are a few. We've talked about the first one, but lack of a fire suppression system and partial first floor fire detection really affects on the building use, and as far as what operations would happen on the second level there. Domestic water service is lacking. It's fed from another building across the care center. And the second floor ramp, more recently we were found out the deficiencies were limited to no more than 10 people on that ramp at a time.
Commissioner Manis Castillo.
I'm really concerned,
Yeah.
given that we have Fright Farm starting in a couple weeks.
I know.
And we're moving people through, there's a liability issue here. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm looking at the lawyers nodding yes. This seems really dangerous, and it seems like something that we should not do out of good common sense.
So, Madam Chair,
Yeah,
Commissioner
look at
Manis
that.
Castillo, we've evaluated all this. We're not saying that this is a new liability, first of all, that we've never incurred or a risk that we haven't had. The biggest risk on the fire side actually exists in the summer when the combustibility of materials being stored up there in the heat are there at that's actually the biggest risk right now. Which is not to say there's zero risk to the idea of this, right? This is a grandfathered in building the way it currently works. Part of the reason why a user agreement is so important is articulating the risks to those on the ground, though, that need to be present to oversee them. And to be sure that they are both watching for the correct things, stationing people in the right places, and right now we're just working on a trust and hope type process. So I actually would argue we are attempting to mitigate the largest risks immediately through the fact that trained law enforcement officers, who are a big part of this process with the foundation and in the support, they have the ability to effectively monitor the site and manage crowd control. One of the biggest fears would be a fire starting during Fright Farm and people think it's a part of the show without adequate egress and ingress, right? Like that's a terrifying example for all of us that now I've said on the record so we all know it's there. So the user agreement needs to reflect that piece. I do not think we should just allow Fright Farm to move forward without a user agreement in place because of what we now know. And that's partly why we had this conversation today. But the idea of simply, we think it's too far to say you cannot host any events in the building until it's fixed. That would also have a significant impact, and we're trying to weigh the different pieces, but we need our partners to understand the risk. And for example, if you count, I think there are more than 10 people on that ramp. The line will need to queue below the ramp, right? Like a carnival ride, you need to queue below the ramp and 10 people at a time can come up the ramp. These are the types of things where we need immediate behavior change and we need to be clear because that doesn't fit the new rules.
Right.
I'm gonna be there every night scolding them.
And I will add, those discussions are ongoing, so it's not that they are unaware of this issue, this recent issue, but again, documenting in the user agreement and ensuring that those requirements are followed is key.
Yeah,
I just
Commissioner
want to add,
Manis,
so I went to the Master Gardeners plant sale.
Yes.
And it was raining. And I can assure you there were more than 10 of us standing on that ramp at the event as well. So making sure that we're doing safety all the way around. And what does 10 people, or is it a weight capacity, right? I mean, there's.
But, so, Madam Chair, Commissioner Castillo, until 3 weeks ago, we were not putting together a user agreement for this. So this is, like, literally as of today moving forward, we're seeking the agreement on the idea that we are gonna go out and enforce the idea that user agreements and education with and support are a part of it. There has been no event to date that would comply with, like, asking for those pieces. We need to be thoughtful while then thinking about the long-term health of the building alongside it.
Okay, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Domestic water service? Is it because the building was built so long ago as it was a functioning barn?
Right.
That just shocks the heck out of me.
Yeah.
It was a barn.
It-
Ran a pipe from the care center.
Commissioner Reinhardt, that was it
Oh
might
my.
have been there existing, but it was certainly only a minimal water supply to feed a barn, and they never did anything different. This is why there are always issues when the restrooms receive a little more than daily use, but there is not an easy fix to that.
This is mainly during the fair.
Right,
They have
that
the-
they have issues with restrooms capacity and water flow. But in order to fix any of that, it would require a new water main, from the street to the building. And if we're gonna do that, then it should also accomplish the fire suppression
Is that
system.
right? Because
So it's a
they
major,
have,
they bring in portables.
Yes, the
And they
portables.
should bring in
Okay.
more portables.
And are they sprinklered? I mean, with the water supply, is this building sprinklered?
No, no,
Oh,
they,
that's what you're
part of the
saying.
first
no,
floor.
they've got,
No fire, that's what you're saying.
Mary
No fire
Jo,
suppression
they've got
system.
buckets
Yeah,
for water.
okay. I was just,
So this
you're
would all
right,
be
it's
part
not
of a
sprinkled.
different
Yeah, so this is a major,
project.
and I would just say that as we look at this, that we, on the legislative committee, know that this would be available, I mean, this is just a building that we should get bonding money for if we do decide to do something.
Madam Chair, I think, I would just say, but first we want to present it as part of a broader campus
Yes,
conversation.
no,
because
absolutely.
we need to define the
Yeah.
long-term idea around use and value before,
Absolutely.
because it's a sizable, anything will cost a lot of money here.
And I agree with that, but if you do decide that we go forward with it, that this would be a candidate for some of that. As Jennifer's in the crowd, yeah, we can have some legislation. Commissioner Reinhardt, yeah.
we actually had a request for state bonding when we wanted to complete the roof. And we were granted money for it, but when we looked at the
strings.
the strings that were attached to it, it wasn't, basically it wasn't worth it to us.
Yes, that's right.
To do that. But what we're talking about now is something that's more significant than that. And just
Well,
out of
let's just look at
curiosity, on the fire suppression, so, at Landmark Center and Union Depot, how, that must have been put in after? We have fire suppression there, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm getting kind of afraid of assuming anything. But, so that was put in then after as well, because clearly those things weren't available at that point.
Yes, Commissioner Reinhardt, that's part of the major renovations which, occurred in the two other buildings you mentioned. But for the historic barn, the only part that was really renovated was the half of the first floor for the office space. And the most they did at that time was put in a partial fire detection system.
Yeah, it
but
was
no
minor.
suppression.
It was minor.
Yeah, Commissioner Carter?
So, clearly all of the items we've talked about are concerns for events. I'm really also wanting to ask about the office space and how we look at these limitations as it applies to people who are office there as well. That, to my mind, is a risk and an ongoing risk. And can you say anything about how we look at that? Is this permanent office space for us? Are we thinking
Right.
that we may need to make certain?
Well,
I think, Commissioner, that's part of the campus discussion that we'd like to come back and talk to you
Got
about
it.
more in December, the use of this building in the
So
context of the
right.
Maplewood campus.
And in the short term, on the risk side, Madam Chair, I would just
Yeah.
add that because the first floor actually has partial fire suppression stuff, the risk is not the same as, there's a reason why we're highlighting events, because events bring in the hayloft, which is a totally different level of
Right.
short-term risk for us.
Yeah.
But to Deputy County Manager Burr's
Okay.
point, the broader piece, we will talk to you about a broader vision for how this might plug in as a piece of this.
And I think the historical, not historical, but the background on what was in there before, when the University of Minnesota Extension Service had extension offices in every county, at least one in every county, and that changed. Because that was a pretty vibrant space.
That's why
Yeah. Wow.
I think we've in fact actually really talked about the discussion items here on this last slide, so unless anyone has any further comments or questions, I think we can say thank you for your time.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and we look forward to further information and further clarification on some of these items. So thank you all for your work.